Добрый день, уважаемые гости. Прошу вас обратить ваше внимание на экран.
News is fake. Fake news. You're fake news.
You are fake news.
Pope Francis wearing a stylish white puffer jacket. It's a fake. Here are more Pope fakes. Hit social media, weeping in court as he's sentenced.
A fake image explosion right near the Pentagon.
It got me thinking about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups, and you can't get charged more just for being a woman.
Don't listen to fake news.
Как вы уже успели...
As you may have noticed, the topic of today is the fake news and disinformation. Let me introduce today's speakers: Bill Richardson, former governor of New Mexico and the U.S. presidential administration, and 4 times nominee for laureate Hilda Sherrill Lee. Then Everett Heath, Global Head of Forensic Investigation and Intelligence Group. Vitaly Warner, founder of Transparency International, member of the Human Rights Committee under President Charles McLean, former NBC's Africa Bureau Chief. And let me now give the floor to Alfush Valid, International Media Manager.
Sam, hello everybody, dear audience. We have full house, which is a good sign for us today. As you noticed, we're going to talk about fake news and disinformation today. When I was outside, I had different journalists that were asking why talking about fake news in an economical forum. And my answer was so simple that in Astana International Forum, lots of people are talking about new technologies in energy, and the main object of the forum when you do on this level, which by the way I would like to thank the Kazakh government for a great organization. So my answer was that it's very important to talk about these problems, global problems that concerns all of us. And we cannot talk about information, forgetting that today we are living in a period where fake news is coming daily to our phones, to our iPads. And lots of people do not realize where is fake news and where is the real news. I had a chat yesterday with Tom from Kroll before dinner, and we had a conversation about fake news, if ever fake news will have parents. And Tom was saying that if everybody remembers the word kompromat, which came from the Soviet times, kompromat. So he was saying that kompromat might be the father of fake news. And I had I had to add, because I said fake news has to also have a mother. And I said, well, propaganda should be the mother of fake news. So fake news is the product of kompromat and propaganda. Well, our first speaker will be Tom. For those who doesn't know what Kroll is, I can just simply say that this is the biggest investigation and intelligence company, private company, on planet Earth. Tom, let's dive in.
Thank you, Walid. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start with the story of an encounter a friend of mine had in Cairo. He was there on business. He's a collector, if that's the correct word. And he went down to the Khan al-Khalili, which is a famous souk, the bazaar in Cairo. And as easily happens, he was dragged into a shop by a shopkeeper who was saying, you know, I have everything to sell, what do you want? He said, well, I'm looking for a present for my wife. Do you have anything special? And the shopkeeper said, my friend, I have everything, but something really special for you. And he goes into the back of the shop, comes back out carrying a wooden box, which he very carefully lays on the table in front of my friend. Opens it up with great deference, and inside is a skull. My friend looks at the skull. This, my friend, is the skull of Cleopatra, the queen of the Egyptians. And I said it to you for $1 million. My friend looked at this and says, this is fantastic. This is amazing. But I'm really not sure that, you know, I've got $1 million. Don't worry, my friend. He goes to the back of the shop, and he comes back out with a slightly smaller box. She lays down, carefully opens the lid. Inside is a smaller skull. This, my friend, is the skull of Cleopatra when she was a child. Why am I telling you this story? It explains fake news. The Egyptian merchant was presenting alternative fictions and inviting my friend to believe them, which one, any of them, but he got to decide. He was giving a choice over what he wanted to believe. And kind of, this is at the heart of fake news. You have its creators, its architects, its armorers, weaponizers, call them what you will. They are creating a parallel reality, a parallel fiction. But as importantly, they're finding, targeting, again, call it what you will, an audience that is willing to believe them, that is willing to accept this parallel narrative. And this disruptive agenda, when it meets a willing audience, is the dangerous thing. Now look, as Walid was saying, there's nothing new in this. Propaganda, you know, Walid mentioned this earlier, is, you know, as old as civilization. You know, read the Epic of Gilgamesh, you know, written 4,500 years ago, and you'll see the propaganda was alive and well and became Babylon then. Compromat has been around for a long time. There's nothing new in this. What's different is the availability of technology to do what you saw on the screens earlier, and the social media platform's ability to disseminate this information at a terrific pace. And more importantly than that, the algorithms, the tools that allow people to find their precise audience. It's not just widespread dissemination, it is targeted dissemination that goes to the actual audiences who are willing to believe it. How can it be combated? By understanding its principles, that there are people making it, they have a purpose for making it, and they're trying to find the audience. I'll give you an example which is not fake news, but it illustrates those points. So 40 years ago, 1983, Stern newspaper in Germany paid just over 8 million Deutschmarks pre-euro to buy Hitler's diaries. They're really excited by this. They take them to a famous historian at Cambridge, a guy called Hugh Trevor Roper, who was an expert on that period, and they ask him to authenticate or not these diaries. He looks at them, he goes over them, he says, these are real. This is the real thing. Yeah, I've seen Hitler's handwriting, this is the real thing. Of course they weren't. Of course they weren't. They were a forgery by a guy called Konrad Kujau, who spent 2 years writing 60 volumes of, he was committed to his art, 60 volumes of fake diaries he wrote, which was subsequently exposed. Well, what had happened here? The forger had found an audience. He had Stern wanted to believe this. They sold the syndication rights for a large amount of money. Hugh Trevor Roper really wanted to believe that this was true, because that for him was going to be a coup as a historian, to be the first people to get their hands on Hitler's diaries and rewrite that period of 20th century history. And of course, the minute people didn't want to believe, then they were exposed as being a fiction. And in this lies really my view of how fake news can be combated. Other people on the panel are going to talk to you about complex and sophisticated technology that deals with hunter-killer AI and algo manipulation to combat what's going. There are experts on that here. I'm not one of them. I'm old-fashioned. I think you combat this with truth. Fact-based, evidence-backed truth. And the challenge is to find the right paths of disseminating this truth and showing it to the audience in a way that is comprehensible. But truth, Aristotelian truth, still has a place in the settling of debates. I'll give you an example. 10, slightly more years ago, in Kuwait, a social media campaign was blowing up in which a number of allegations were made of huge levels of corruption by ministerial level members of the Al Sabah ruling family. And this was causing considerable outrage. It culminated in a protest being staged in Erida Square, which is the sort of central square in the heart of Kuwait City, in which projected onto large screens set up were images of bank statements purporting to show transfers to bribing judges, billions of dollars in bank accounts. There was some audiovisual footage showing people plotting a coup against the emir. It was all laid out. The government of Kuwait hired my firm, Kroll, not to investigate whether the allegations were true, but they hired us to examine the materials that had been presented to see if they were legitimate. And we were able to demonstrate reasonably quickly that the bank statements were forged, that the audiovisual footage had been manipulated, some quite sophisticated techniques measuring the background hum of the electricity signal on where the recording was done showed that they hadn't in fact been recorded and where it was supposed to be recorded and other parts of it had been manipulated. The report we produced was presented to the National Assembly, Kuwait's parliament, and a shorter version was published in both the Arabic and the English newspapers in Kuwait. And the chief member of the opposition who had been making these allegations went on TV and apologized and said, it has been shown by the work done by Kroll that these materials were not true, and I apologize. And that particular crisis in Kuwait was resolved by the presentation of truth. We do the same thing for corporates, businessmen today who are subject to fake news attacks, people who are seeking to damage their reputation, to accuse them of money laundering or sanctions evasions, etc. There is a power in presenting truth to solve these problems. The advantage we have in this space is that we can access the audience. The access for compromat, for fake news in the business environment is take that to the regulators, you take that to the counterparties, you take that to the compliance officers at banks. These are the people who are the targets of these attacks, and you can show them the truth and you can solve the problem. That's not so easy in the political realm, and I leave it to my colleagues to address that problem. And I look forward to taking questions from you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Just this small comment that you were saying that you're old-fashioned and you always search for truth. Just small comment, truth is never old-fashioned.
That doesn't mean that I'm not old-fashioned.
Yeah, this means that you're not old-fashioned at all. A quick answer, just small question. I know that your company do deal with big global companies that they can be victims of fake news.
Yep.
And for big companies, fake news is not only something to deal with. It's like for them, it harms the business. Can you please, like very briefly, just maybe give us an example without saying the name of the companies, briefly?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we find this comes up regularly. We will find it in the context of commercial disputes. Parties will arrange for disinformation campaigns. They will have friendly journalists bought off. They will create fake news websites. They will go to considerable lengths to create a negative narrative around individuals sometimes, or the activities of corporates themselves. At the moment in vogue are allegations of sanctions evasion, of dealing with politically exposed people, of laundering money, and it is bribing government officials as another popular theme at the moment. And great sophistication goes into this. And of course, this initial challenge is it feels like an exercise for the people who are under attack that they're trying to prove a negative. They're trying to prove that they didn't do something, which is a difficult thing to do. And that's a hard process to engage in, to show that you didn't do something, particularly when there is a body of material that is being developed suggesting inaccurately that you did. And it can be a long journey to go to the trouble of having somebody independent, which is where we come in, reconstruct financial transactions, to have a forensic audit of the books and records, to show that no payments were made, to show there was no financial leakage, to demonstrate that there is no transactional contact with sanctions breaching entities. But you've got to go through that process line by line of doing it. Where we are successful is when we are being able to take that truth independently to the core constituency that matters. So going to regulators, going to a court, going to sanctioning bodies, going to the compliance officers at banks and saying, look, this is what really happened. We'd like you to assess the information that we've independently prepared and independently investigated, and here are the facts on the ground, here is the evidence to support it. Now go and form a view. That we can change their opinions, but it's harder to change public opinion because public opinion doesn't want to read through the facts. So we can solve a business problem more easily than we can solve a public opinion problem. Does that answer your question?
It's, yeah, I understand your answer is like more general than concrete because of like it's like confidential. Thank you for that. До того, как передам слово председателю.
Before I give the floor to the chief of Committee of Information of Kazakhstan, I would like to note that here is Deputy Foreign Minister of Kazakhstan. He is busy with telephone. We are glad that you are here. Dear Eldos, you as a representative of the government, and you know that in these hard times you have a very difficult position as a chairman of the Information Committee of Kazakhstan. Can you tell us how your ministry on the legal level or legislative level, is it trying or is it fighting the mass fake news appearance here in Kazakhstan? We know that in Kazakhstan a lot of people, they use mobile phones and Telegram channels, and they sit a lot in TikTok, and this is not a difficult task. And can you tell us a bit how the situation is from the legal point of view? Thank you, Walid, and it's a very good question. Fake news is really a problem. Tom told a lot about that, and our country is not an exclusion. The question is about the harm of fake news that it is causing to the society, and the harm, it also varies from the simple fake news that some people might find funny, ridiculous, until those that can lead to significant, serious consequences. And this is a very important thing. And in general, if we speak, the peak of a dissemination of fake information here in Kazakhstan, we can say that it was during pandemic period, during the pandemic. And Kazakhstani people, they have felt themselves the entire specter of fake news. Everybody remember that, starting with the helicopters that fly in the night, flying either spreading this the weather. The helicopters. Well, many people got this information, not just helicopters, but black helicopters flying over the cities, and there were the absolutely non-standard, like incomprehensive methods of treatment of disease. Part of the people, they believed in that, and it led to consequences from the point of view of harm that the society receives with this kind of news. And of course, the people themselves, they are the part of it, because why the fake information gets the virus character. First of all, we need to admit that these are the consequences of the change of media use of the people that leads to reduction of critical thinking. The people, the mass audience, it goes to clickbait titles. They do not analyze the information. The filter goes down, and this kind of information, that's why this kind of information is disseminated. And second part is that many people get the fake information from the close people. Like when you are getting the information from your friend, or from your family member, or from your relative, or colleague, or neighbor, then a person gets this illusion of truthfulness, like especially if your mother-in-law gives this information. Yes, you believe in that, and this kind of information is trustworthy, and this is one of the most widespread mistakes, and this is the reason of the virus nature of fake information. Now, today, we have a very good development of AI, the ChatGPT, Midjourney, Deepfake, and if text is still okay, you can fight with text, but it's more difficult to fight with image. When a person, as they have showed in the video, he speaks, he looks like and on this image, and now I think that it's great that in these technologies were developed in like last half year. Can you imagine what would happen if it were during pandemic? During pandemic, it was difficult. I agree with you. Tell us, please. I cannot, like being in Kazakhstan, I cannot. I should touch upon the topic, the global topic, and I have watched today morning the interview of Mr. Roman Vasilenko in CNN, when journalist was asking the question about the war of Russia against Ukraine. Here we have the ambassador of Ukraine in Kazakhstan in the room, but my question is more economic. After beginning of the war, many global companies who work in digital technologies, they have left Russia and Belarus. And my question is probably interesting for foreign companies. Are they going to, or there are already, like, can Kazakhstan has its own, could have its own Silicon Valley with their own legislative platform with startups that would work with IT technologies? Well, Walid, IT technologies are not our profile, but I would like to say that notwithstanding the events that are taking place outside of our country, the interest, as you said, of big companies. Big companies, they are interested in our country, and our ministry, and its part, conducts the work on development of cooperation with such companies, notwithstanding the country of origin, and the most important part here is the result, is the outcome. Well, I would like to finish my thought. I would like to add in the beginning that the format of our panel could be, yes, you can comment the talk, yes, and afterwards the people in the room can ask the question. I would just would like to finish my thought. Well, with regard to methods of fight and countering such fake information, if to generalize, there is very small amount of it. Number one is increasing the level of media of media awareness of the people, the critical thinking. It's a long term. It depends on training, on how the information is received, and the people themselves. Second is limitation of dissemination of such fake information. It is not an easy matter with the development of technology and etc. And number three, today, as we are using as a ministry, is dissemination of truthful information, trustworthy information, what Tom told about, the truth, so that to make the user, so that the user would get the that information much earlier than he gets the fake information. And as of today, this is the working mechanism, and I will remind the Kazakhstani people know that during pandemic there was a good resource. It's called Stop Fake. And it has proven itself. Is it application or it's an organization? No, it's a website. It's a service where that quickly has provided the truth of the information regarding the fake information that was circulating, and it has made that people quite comfortable, so that the people would open up their website and read, and it was a very good source for mass media. Just yesterday in New York Times there was a information. It was a biasometer app that can confirm the trustworthiness of the information. You input the information over there, it provides you with services and gives the assessment. It was just yesterday it was announced, that kind of technology. Yes, and this is related to the matter of development of AI. That's it, Walid. Thank you very much, and we will get back to you soon.
Is a living legend, Mr. Bill Richardson. Yeah, yeah, I'm talking about you. So, as we heard before, that Bill was not only twice Secretary of State under Clinton, Bill Clinton, and Obama. He was 3 times nominated for Nobel Prize. But as he said yesterday on our dinner, that his most appreciated post on his life, that he was elected as governor of New Mexico. So, Mr. Governor, can you please tell us a little bit what influence of fake news had on you personally during your work with President Clinton and Obama?
Well, thank you, Walid. I think as Tom mentioned, and I like because he told stories, you know, when you're a politician, first of all, I've been limited on speaking. That is torture for a politician. Number 2, I'm too old to have been affected by fake news. My last post was 2010, Governor of New Mexico. And yes, there was advertising that was false, but there were no media platforms then. Twitter, Facebook, they were emerging. They weren't strong. But today, I think that the issue of fake news and disinformation in my country is very, very severe. Now, today, this morning, when I couldn't sleep, I was preparing for this talk, and I want to explain my biases. 1, I'm not an expert on this issue. 2, I can barely use my iPhone, so I'm not a techie. 3, and you're wondering why I'm using my earphones when English is Walid, who's an excellent moderator, is because I'm partially deaf. So I'm admitting those biases. I'm also saying to you that I'm usually an optimist, but I think this artificial intelligence fake news issue is becoming more important and getting worse in terms of solutions. Now, I'd like that the minister concentrated on solutions, and I will try to do the same. Okay, so this morning, and another bias, I'm a Democrat. I don't like Donald Trump at all right? So take that into account. He was our president. He does have 30% of the American people supporting him, but 30. He's going to run again. I don't think he can win, but who knows in politics, nothing is certain. So The ad today that I saw in my Twitter account was that artificial intelligence is being used against the perpetrator of fake news, Donald Trump, by Governor DeSantis of Florida, who is running against them for president in the primaries. And there's a fake ad that shows President Trump and Anthony Fauci, who is our leader, medical leader on the pandemic issue, hugging each other and saying how close they were, while everybody knew they hated each other, and they do now. And what was my reaction as a former politician, somebody that's run for office 9 times? My reaction is I don't like it because it's wrong. It's not the truth. And I don't think there's any regulation. There's some United Nations solutions that I think have to be considered. But am I optimistic that Facebook and Twitter are going to fix this on their own? No. Am I optimistic that governments, although it seems from the minister that you have a handle on this, but I'm speaking about my country, is it going to be fixed? I don't think so. I think it's going to affect this 2024 election. It's mainly, I'm going to say, one of my biases on the Republican side. But it could continue unless we deal with artificial intelligence and fake news as a world, multilaterally. Now, I liked what your president said. Let's deal with solutions multilaterally. I like that. And I want to commend the Astana Forum. You're dealing with climate change, food insecurity, geopolitical issues, water. No, it's a great forum. But I think this is going to become artificial intelligence, one of the dominant issues of our time. And we don't have a handle. Maybe we'll hear from some of my colleagues. But so my concern is this. Is it as bad as some say, artificial intelligence, that it's going to affect nuclear wars, pandemics? No. Yeah, there's a threat, of course, but there's also some good side. You know, I read an article about how somebody who couldn't walk because artificial intelligence penetrated his brain, he could walk a little bit. And antibiotics, you know, there's some advances. I think the biggest threat that this poses, unless we deal with it, is a threat to democracy, is a threat to elections, is a threat to getting the public to understand and recognize that some of this advertising, some of this technology is running so fast, and it is affecting so many of us, so many platforms, especially younger people, that unless we have a balance, a checks and balance between the tech companies and governments like yours, we're going to lose control of this issue. All right, so am I speaking too long? Do you want me to?
It's okay, but we still have, I think, 30 minutes to finish, so no, it's okay. Maybe one more minute, and we go
1
to
minute.
the then.
Thank you, Wally.
Yeah.
All right, so what are the solutions? What are the solutions? I don't know. How's that for an answer? All right, limit the content, find ways to inform the public. That's good. 3, do it voluntarily, tech companies and governments. No, that's not going to work. There has to be a combination of some legislation and some agreements between tech companies and the private sector and governments. Again, am I optimistic that it's going to happen? I'm not sure. And I think it's getting out of control, and we can't just dismiss it. Oh, this is fake news. Because the public, individuals that absorb this, because there's so many platforms, and AI is at a breakneck speed. There's a discovery every day. And what happens if just in advertising. There is video, there is physical movement, besides photographs. This DeSantis Trump was a photograph. But what if they're videos and they're saying, well, this is what this man said, and they have his voice or her voice, and it's fake? So I'm sorry I can't be more optimistic, but that's what I believe. And I think the Astana Forum is an excellent, the fact that you have this panel, this is something that you, as a great forum, should concentrate on for the future. Just have it on artificial intelligence, because it's going to be with us.
Thank you, Governor. And yeah. Well, hopefully on the next forum next year, maybe one of the big topics will be fake news and AI, hopefully. And thank you for being optimistic. This is the only thing that we should, do every day, being optimistic.
I would like to give the floor to Vitaly Voronov, who is a famous lawyer and the founder of Transparency International. Vitaly, I know that in Kazakhstan there are lots of talks about adopting a law about repatriation of assets, and I was surfing on different websites, and I saw that there's an active discussion in the country, and I have a concern. And also the people are complaining that lots of fake news also in relation with this news. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to talk about a little bit different, but I got a message that we have only 20 minutes left, and I wanted you to start with this. And I would like to request you to starting with answering to this very question. Well, adopting the budget by the lower house, as one of the MPs said, even that is based upon fake information. And in Kazakhstan, lots of interesting and curious stuff is happening, including the one on, including the bill on repatriation of the assets. And I am not the founder of Transparency International. I am the founder of Transparency International Kazakhstan. So it was the sample of fake news from me in respect of you. Well, the Transparency International Kazakhstan actually made a lot of initiatives in respect of returning those kind of assets. And in 2003, we held a global conference in Kazakhstan, and it was dedicated to the transparency of deals in mining industry, in extractive industries. And even though Kazakhstan ratified the Convention on the Fight Against Corruption, and it now can be used in order to make the draft bills and then to make that kind of information open. But unfortunately, we are not complying with the requirements of that convention, and the bill didn't go sufficiently and appropriately through circulation and adoption. And maybe I'm creating fake news as well, but we just didn't know about that. But you were yourself the one who suffered because of fake news of the foreign reporter. Well, fake. Mr. Richardson just said that he wasn't a specialist in that, but we made friends with him. He the fan of Alvarez, and I'm the fan of Golovkin, but it makes no impediment for us to make friends and sit next to each other. And I was one of the designers of the law on the very first law in Kazakhstan about mass media. It was June in 1991, and as a lawyer, I had a huge experience on protecting public against such news and journalists who were not scrupulous in disseminating the information, and you can use only transparency and openness and providing the truthful information to fight the corruption and libel. And me as a member of the Human Rights Council, so we are looking into different things, including protecting the rights of the journalists and the right for dissemination of information. And in July last year, for myself, I discovered that on Intelligence Online channel, the French reporter Alice Pantalier, I think her name was Pantalier, so she published an article, and it said that Vitaly Voronov, who is the founder of Voronov and Partners, wants to ramp up efforts on hunting over the assets of Nazarbayev family. And I don't know where from she got that information. And we, as Transparency International, we offer our services in Kazakhstan, including public bodies, and that was it. And the consequences were quite unbelievable. I mean, it was just outraging because I wanted to find her and I wanted to sue her. It was my first reaction, but it was a fake news because I wasn't at all applied by anybody that, and I wasn't at all stating and appealing that such work should be started. And even more work now. Perhaps they did know. Yesterday, our president made a speech on this forum, and he said that we should not be reading only titles, but we should be also trying to get into the essence of the problem. But the people only just read the titles, and through that I came to this forum. And another two words in respect of the bill in the lower house of the parliament, and I do hope that the Parliament will not be in haste in adopting it, despite instruction of President to get it adopted in March, and the situation then changed. The Parliament dismissed itself, and then there were elections again, and now it's now attacked by criticism by almost everybody in Kazakhstan, and it needs very thorough scrutiny before we adopt any law in respect of such repatriation of assets. So all this should include many things, including presumption of innocence and judicial protection and the protection of the right for property. So, and I am afraid that those kind of risks are there, and we should make our utmost effort to not to do those mistakes. And
McLean is, well, for me personally, he's one of the reasons why I ever wanted to be in news business. Because Charles was one of the first ever journalists that was live from different historical events, including, I don't know if we have the picture of him with Nelson Mandela. He was the first foreign journalist to meet and interview Nelson Mandela after he went out of prison. But you know, there is something that changed even my life. Is the beginning of war in Iraq. First one, the second war. And I know that he was on the region at that time. And I have like maybe a big global question, historical question, concerning, we all remember Foreign Secretary Colin Powell in the United Nations when he showed all the planet Earth that in a small something. Well, this is the picture. You can just see it. So this is the arms of mass destructions that Iraq had. It's in his hand. This was really the proof that United States and the whole world should attack Iraq. So my question for you, you was there and you was on those events. My question, can we today, as we have the new term of fake news, can we consider that the war on Iraq was, a cause of a big fake news?
Thank you, Waleed. And like everybody on the panel, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about something that I think all of us are part of and all of us recognize as a major force. So let me address the question about Colin Powell. My feeling about what happened then was that was disinformation. There are even questions about whether Colin Powell himself knew that he was being a vehicle for that disinformation. But it was disinformation in a classic sense. It was old school propaganda in a way. What we're dealing with now with social media, in my view at least, is something of a whole different order. It is propaganda and disinformation on maybe a massive scale. So what I'm going to talk about, well, let me start with Tom, you started with a story. Mine isn't as funny as yours, but I'll start with just an anecdote about a friend of mine named Paul. Paul and I were schoolboys together, and we went to high school together in America, and we played on the same sports teams, and we had many of the same classes, and we were pretty good friends. And we fell out of touch. He went to one university, I went to another in a different part of the country. We fell out of touch, and then Facebook came along, and that gave us a chance to kind of reunite because he showed up on my requests to friend, and so he and I started chatting again occasionally, not that often, but I would see pictures of his family and that kind of thing. And so we stayed in touch, as I said, occasionally. And then about 3 years ago, a little less than 3 years ago, of course, COVID hit. And finally, they came out with the vaccines in America. The Pfizer vaccine was the first one, an mRNA vaccine. And my wife and I rushed out to get our first injections, and I sent Paul a note. And I said, I just got my first Pfizer shot. I feel invincible. It's terrific. I got a response back from him, and it was like, Charles, I am so disappointed in you. How could you inject these poisons into your arm? You're believing that this COVID thing is a real problem. It's just like the flu. And there's this whole conspiracy. And I thought, wow, I was stunned. I hope I'm not talking to people in this audience who think that these vaccines were part of some conspiracy. I mean, I've had all my shots, and I'm really glad about that. But I was stunned by this, and I began a dialogue with Paul back and forth for about 2 years. And he would send me links to YouTube sites. I'd see these guys in white lab coats, and they would tell me about that there's people putting magnets on their chest. It was ridiculous stuff.
This is what was the minister talking about the COVID times and all lots of fake news.
It stunned me, Waleed. And anyway, we had this dialogue for about 2 years, and after about literally 2 years of discussions back and forth, I got a message from Paul, and it said, Charles, you and I are living in different universes now. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that we can be friends. And that's the last that I heard from my friend Paul. I use that introductory story to make a couple points. One is that social media, in my view, has been an incredible opportunity to link people and bring people together in a way that we just didn't have before. I was rediscovering friends that way. But it's also sent us into algorithmic hell. The algorithms, I'm referring to this in my notes as the tyranny of algorithms. These social media sites, as all of you know, work on a business model of eyeballs plus time equals profit. So if they can, whether it's TikTok or Facebook or Reddit or whatever it is, if they can keep you an extra minute, an extra 2 minutes on that site, they can sell you more advertising, they can make a bigger profit. So to do that, they've developed these algorithms. This is a business decision. It's not some nefarious plot by evildoers. They've developed these algorithms to keep you on their sites. And they do that by feeding, by what I guess psychologists call confirmation bias. They feed you stuff they think you already believe, and they find you friends out there who are going to confirm what you think. So my poor friend Paul, who probably thinks I'm his poor friend Charles, but my poor friend Paul, he was led down a rabbit hole of disinformation that was facilitated by these modern platforms, these social media platforms. And that scares me. It scares me for the reasons Governor Richardson mentioned a minute ago. This is going to have political implications, and it's going to be destabilizing, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of democracies. But it's also destabilizing personally. We live in America now, and I'm not going to presume to talk for everybody in this room and your personal experience, but we live in a country that is so divided, much more divided than I've ever known it to be, and I blame a lot of that on social media and the divisive rabbit hole problem that it's created in kind of putting us in armed camps. Well, not armed camps, but socially armed camps. So I think we have to recognize that social media thrives on moral outrage. They figured this out. They know that if you get really, really worked up about some issue, if you're really outraged, you'll spend more time on the site, and that's a more profitable business model. I don't want to overextend my time, but I do want to just venture into the world of AI a little bit here. Because what we've just been discussing about social media, that's one thing. Not altogether good. AI pours jet fuel on that, as far as I can tell. AI has the opportunity or the creative possibilities of creating alternative facts that are really compelling. Not true facts, alternative facts, but they're possibly really, really compelling. And that's a worry. We were admonished at the beginning of the plenary yesterday to think creatively about solutions and not just focus on problems. And I was mulling in my mind what would be a way to kind of address these challenges. I came up with 4 things. Well, we could try to ban or regulate AI. First of all, I think that will fail. I think that AI, social media in general, I think these are the kinds of technologies that you can't really kind of put a top on and put a lid on. In a way, it's sort of like nuclear weapons. I think we all, the whole world realized in 1945 that nuclear weapons were terrible, and we've had these various regimes to try to limit the spread of nuclear weapons. Well, most of the world has that technology now. We didn't really limit the technology very effectively. The problem is fissile material is in short supply, and that we can kind of regulate. But most of, even smaller countries have the technology to build atomic weapons, but they don't have the materials to do it. I don't think that you can stop human knowledge, and I don't think that people are going to effectively stop AI. Now, we could work to develop what I guess they'd be sort of like digital litmus tests. And you were referencing, Walid, that the New York Times.
It's quite new thing, yeah.
it's like in science class, you can put a couple drops of phenolphthalein, I think it is, into a liquid and it will turn a color if it's an acid or a base and whatever. You'd love to have that so you could put a dropper of liquid onto your computer and know whether what you're seeing is true or not. I don't know how successful.
This is what they do when in the airports to check if you have drugs or whatever, to change the color.
I think that as advanced as they make that technology, there will be somebody who will figure out how to circumvent it. And then we're going to be in a whack-a-mole world where they're constantly trying to outthink the regulators. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about that. We can encourage international regulations of AI. That, I think, in terms of is perhaps a more effective way of looking at this than the national level, because this is going on. And if there were international ethics standards, it would at least give some benchmark for interpreting how we view AI. And most important, and this may be the long-term program here, is I think we need to teach critical thinking in schools. And I think that young people need to have the tools to actually look at things and assess whether or not they think this is true or whether it's not true. I'll just close with one of my arguments to my friend Paul about these vaccines. His question was, what is it going to take, Charles, for you to change your mind about these vaccines? And I said, well, at this point, I think about 95% of the scientists in the world think these vaccines are a great thing. They know more about this than I do. When 95% of the scientists in the world think these vaccines are terrible, I'll think they're terrible. I think that, critical thinking skills means that you have to be able to dig out of these rabbit holes. And I think that that's a skill that I think we can start teaching a little more effectively to young people. I can go on a long time about this, Walid, but let's put a pin in it at that point.
I see Tom has a question or something to say.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Charles. I was interested in what Charles
Thank you, Charles, of course. Thank you for being here and for all what you have said. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I was struck listening to Charles and his sort of closing suggestions that we've got three other panelists, and I'm not one of them, who either are or have been lawmakers. And I'd be interested in hearing their views on the role of national government addressing a cross-border, nationless internet on this front. But it strikes me as being kind of a central question that Charles has raised. So I'd interested to know what the lawmakers, past and present, think about that.
Maybe господин председатель может это ответить.
Mr. Chairman, you can reply this question. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
From the audience, просто если вы хотите ответить, то.
But if you want to reply, then we can get back to this. I think Mr. Voronov. Well, to me, it's quite difficult to reply on behalf of our national government. Unfortunately, the public structures, they are very weakly involved into this legislation process. I don't know what our government thinks about it, our president thinks about it. I know that there are tasks. How they are going to be carried out, that's another pair of shoes. And now we get back to questions from the room. From the audience, Mr. Vice Minister, please go ahead.
Terrific panel, terrific moderation. Thank you very much for putting it all together. My question would be to the panel, but maybe primarily to Governor Richardson, as a lawmaker indeed, but also as a former president of Freedom House. How would you advise governments and the international community generally to address this issue, because it seems like there is a an extremely fine line that we all need to walk between the freedom of expression, protecting the freedom of expression, and regulating this important area that seems to have such a huge impact on our societies going forward. And my comment regarding Charles's words about his friend Paul, it seems like the world is getting more Pauls, not Charleses, unfortunately. So what do we do? How do we in fact turn Pauls into Charleses? It's a question, it's a more rhetorical question, but I guess it's a long-term process. But will it take our societies a major jolt to realize that the fake news are dangerous, that fake news can be weaponized like nuclear weapons? Because nuclear energy can be peaceful, nuclear weapons, of course, are not peaceful. So, or do you see there is a growing understanding and recognition on behalf of the global community that this issue needs to be regulated? It cannot be left to private companies to run free. So thank you and sorry for taking long.
Thank you.
I want to defer to the governor first, but I have a comment on that, Roman.
Minister, you're very good. You should run for office. Solutions. And first, to my friend Vasily, I am a big boxing fan. And I learned something from the ambassador of the Ukraine, that the Klitschko brothers, both heavyweight champions, were born here in Kazakhstan. I did not know that. And secondly, on the fights, and I'm half Mexican, Golovkin versus Canelo. They had 3 fights. Canelo won 2, and 1 was tied. But one of the 2 that Canelo won, I was there, and I thought Golovkin won. I do. Well, anyway, that's not fake news.
Thank you.
That's not, but I'm just, okay, so what are in general multilateral solutions? And I think, Charles, I loved what you said, Charles. One, I think democratic governments and big tech companies, this is going to sound very general, but they got to be more transparent. And they're not, 1. 2, do more to protect personal data and privacy. There's too much, companies and others know too much about what we do, what we like. Be reasonable, and you're right, Minister. You know, in my country, it says, oh no, we can do fake news because we got to protect the First Amendment and free speech. And some media companies do that, and I think that's wrong. Number 3, I think end practices. Find some legislation multilaterally that deals with disinformation. Discourage it. Have some kind of penalties, but don't shut down the internet. Don't shut down websites. Don't take extreme measures that are going to contribute to a lack of contact. Now, my last point. I am a great believer in what I do now. I have a foundation, some of my friends are here that deal with hostages around the world, to free hostages. Governments that have differences, they don't trust each other. And what that brings is debates and potential efforts to contribute to wars. And so we have to stop this. So my last point, again, which I said earlier, I think this is, there's something special about this country. You're a bridge between Europe and Asia. You're a bridge, you have huge landmass, you have energy resources, yet you're committed to climate change, to rooting out corruption. An emerging, you're all young. You're all young. Well, most everybody here, except for me. But I think you should continue this dialogue as a nation, this Astana dialogue on these technology issues. Yeah, we've done climate change, that's important. Yeah, we've done food scarcity, geopolitical issues. God knows there are enough problems. But I'm not as optimistic as Charles is, who I think gave an excellent talk, and the minister and Vitali. I just think we don't have a handle on this problem of artificial intelligence, and we have to have solutions. And to do that, you got to talk to people. It can't just be communicating through social media. You got to negotiate. You got to talk like we're doing here. So that's it.
Thank you, Governor. Charles, you wanted to say something also?
Add something maybe a little bit more optimistic about the whole process of regulation. A guy named Ezra Klein, who writes a column in the New York Times, he's a very smart young guy, and he writes thoughtful columns. He went out to Silicon Valley, and he talked to a lot of the engineers who are building this stuff. And he got some interesting responses from these young men and women that he kind of summarized in a column. And I'm just going to briefly read the conclusion of what he wrote. He said, "In a young industry flooded with hype and money, person after person tells me that they are desperate to be regulated, even if it slows them down. In fact, especially if it slows them down. What they tell me is obvious to anyone watching. Competition is forcing them to go too far, too fast, and to cut too many corners. This technology is too important to be left to a race between Microsoft, Google, Meta, and a few other firms." So if, in fact, some of those people out in Silicon Valley are looking for regulation, maybe it is fertile ground for somebody to come in and say, okay, here are the guardrails, and we're going to set them up, and we're going to hope that people will observe them. I'm not maybe as optimistic as some people are about how effective those guardrails will be and how easily they'll be enforced, but you know, when you talk about this as a revolution, the last big revolution, the Industrial Revolution, it took decades for governments to catch up and regulate industries and labor standards and things like that. We don't have decades with social media, and certainly we don't have decades with artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. Next question. What is the
Hello, everyone. I am glad to participate in this
Можете
discussion.
представиться, пожалуйста?
My name is Janat Aymaganov. I am after Kazakh Latin alphabet abcnet.kz. You can find me. You can check me. It's very easy. ABC, it's alphabet.
Okay, go with the question. Thank you.
Okay. My question, I think to, how can I say, to struggle with disinformation, it's very easy. We need just, how can I say, our claim of browser and maybe in YouTube must, in social media, everyone must set up full information. It's very easy.
Just sorry, because we do you have a question for our speakers?
Yes, but I noted one, for example, in Kazakhstan. Then more dangerous information, they fast transform between. For example, one of the most, how can I say that, use in social media's website, you know.
Yes,
sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll check also your website. Следующий вопрос. У кого-то есть вопросы?
Next question. Does anybody have a question?
You know, it's
but we just now it's time for questions.
Question.
So if there is no questions, we would like to give the microphone for somebody who will ask questions.
Okay, no problem.
And then I will come and talk to you after the panel.
It's not my question, it's my answer.
Thank you very much. Спасибо
to
большое.
Struggle to disinformation. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Я знаю, что у Юра был вопрос.
I know Yuri had a question. He yesterday mentioned about it. Oh, you got the answer.
That we had a great panel because we answered all the questions before they were even asked. Yes, and Bill has something to say.
You know, we didn't talk about the news media, which also has a role here. I'm talking about your local news, and I want to say something about, I was interviewed yesterday by a woman named Julia from an Orda network. tough questions, good questions. I think a free press is very important. But the challenge for the press is going to be, are they going to, for instance, take the money from a candidate that is promoting fake news to get their 30-second spot? We haven't talked about, but that's another subject.
This is why we would like that, maybe we would love that if next year one of the topics will be news and NI. We have a question. Если можете представиться и вопрос.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is John. I'm of Vernon Capital Private Equity Investment Company. Many thanks for an exciting discussion. And again, I'm sorry for that, but mine is not a question, but a quick observation. It has to do with the way Mr. Bill Richardson was introduced. He was introduced as a Secretary of State under the Bill Clinton administration. And actually, you know, the term Secretary of State is used to refer to ministerial level officials in Britain. And in the United States, it's referred to one specific person, the head of the United States Department of State. So it created an impression that Mr. Bill Richardson has served as the head of the United States Department of State, which I suppose he has not. So many thanks for this practical exercise in spotting fake news, anyway.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to give an example, basically. Thank you for that. We'll take it into consideration for the next time. Thank you. Тогда, if one of our speakers would like to finalize before we finish our session. If not, thank you very much. Mr. Minister, you want to say something? No? Okay. Thank you very much for the audience, for our speakers, for everybody who's present. Спасибо, что нашли время присоединиться к...
Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you like really the panel.